This was a nightstand and dresser set that I found on the curb that somebody was getting rid of and throwing out. I started by taking the bases off of the dresser and the nightstands. It made it pretty outdated, and taking them off just made it look more modern. A lot of older dressers usually have that curvy detailing on the front. I see some other furniture flippers will cut them to make clean lines, but this one was pretty easy to remove. It was just a couple screws. After I removed the base from the nightstand and the dresser, I gave it a really good scrub using water and Dawn dish soap. Dawn is really good for breaking through the grease and grime that we a lot of the time find on these dressers. And I just want to clean all of the previous year's gunk off of it and make sure that you're starting with a clean slate before you paint. After scrubbing it down, you want to rinse it really well as well. You do not want to paint over any sort of soap residue. I just have a spray bottle with clean water in it that I go around and spray down where there's any soap left over and give it a good wipe. I make sure I do this a couple times so that I know I'm not missing any soap that will be left behind. Cleaning is definitely the most important step, I would say, or at least one of them. When you're redoing furniture, because you want to make sure that your surface that you're going to paint is prepped really properly. Your paint is only as good as the surface that you're painting on top of. This dresser was actually already previously painted. However, the person who painted it didn't prep properly, unfortunately, so the paint was not sticking. I scraped off some of the finish that was on top that was just loose and ready to come off. There's some other stubborn parts that needed to be stripped. So I used the stripper to get the remaining paint off of the whole dresser. This took quite a lot of time, but it was needed in order to get the new paint on it. After I got the whole thing stripped down, I cleaned off any remaining stripper residue and rinsed it off, and then I scuff sanded the entire body and drawers. Everywhere that's going to be painted needs a good scuff sand so that the paint will adhere to the surface. I just use a 180 grit sandpaper to scuff sand. You want to make sure that you're removing the glossy finish from the surface before painting. It's not a very good surface for the paint to stick to when it has that shiny look to it, and you want to make sure that it's a bit roughed up so that the paint has something that it can actually grab onto and adhere to. After all your surfaces are scuff sanded, you want to wipe them all down to make sure that you get all of the sanding dust that you've kicked up off, and that way you will have a clean surface to paint on. I actually did this a little bit backwards because I usually fill in any gouges before I do the scuff sanding, but here I went through after I did the scuff sanding and made sure I filled in any gouges. This dresser had a lot, so I just went in with some wood filler and filled in any deep scratches and gouges. I knew I wasn't going to be able to get every single one of them, but I did get as many as I could. I knew the dresser wasn't going to have a flawless factory finish when I was done, but I just did the best I could, and that was good enough for me. After I had all of the wood filler filled in and sanded back, I then primed the whole piece. The wood filler would have pulled in the paint a little bit differently than the rest of the surfaces, so I wanted to make sure that I had primer on the whole piece before I started painting. After priming, I sanded to make sure it was a smooth surface, and then I was able to paint. This color is Algonquin by Fusion Mineral Paint. I wanted something that was neutral, and this is one of my favorite neutral colors from the Fusion paint line. After painting my first coat, I sanded the whole surface. I usually like to use a finishing pad that's specifically for in between coats, but I did run out, so I was just using a 220 grit sandpaper. Since this paint has such great coverage, it only required 2 coats. So the whole piece wasn't just beige, I wanted to add a little pop of detail. I used this peel and stick liner. I used it on the shelves on the nightstands and on the shelves in the dresser behind the doors. This stuff can be a little bit of a headache, but it was a really great way to pull together the nightstands and the dresser. Since this guy comes and visits every day to get some peanuts, I figured I would introduce him on here. His name's Chip. He's been around the last couple of years. He comes by pretty much every day and fills himself up on peanuts. I decided last minute that I wanted to do a faux wood look on the top of these nightstands and dresser. I achieved this look by using Fusion stain and finishing oil in the color cappuccino. I just took it and using a foam brush wiped it on the whole top surface, and once it was on, immediately I wiped it back using a blue shop rag. I didn't do the best job of wiping it in a straight line, which is what will make it look the most realistic, but you can always go back after it dries with a second coat and do any touch-ups that you need done. I knew that gold would look really great with this paint color, so I took the hardware that I wanted to put on and sprayed it all to match in a gold color. And once it was dry, I installed it onto the dresser. And now that the hardware's on, here is the final result. I am extremely happy with how this one turned out. It turned out exactly how I imagined, and I think it looks a lot better than when I picked it up off the curb. Let me know what you guys think.